is time to start. We will begin by turning to number 157. 157, Does Jesus Care? Well, since I'm the lone preacher here tonight, I get to pick. But if we did that one, it would be on the screen, is that right? What number is that one? Okay. Hopefully I pretty much know it. Okay, we'll go at 90. Y'all, all 7 of you are going to have to sing real loud, okay? Okay, made it through that. Genesis chapter 4. Actually, we're still in Genesis chapter 4. Okay, and last week we talked about the birth of Cain and Abel. We talked about Abel bringing the fruit of the ground and Cain bringing a lamb. And God had respect for Abel's offering, but not for Cain's. And Cain was not too happy about that. And he threw a temper fit. And we talked about the reason why Cain was angry and the reason why typically people get angry. And that usually narrows down to some kind of form of self-centeredness. We get upset when things don't go the way we want them to. And certainly, things didn't go the way that Cain had wanted them to. And so God showed him what to do. he told him in verse 7, if thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted. And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. And so God tells Cain, you do the right thing, you'll be accepted. And we talked about why did God have respect toward Abel's offering and not toward Cain's, and the only possible reason for that would be that Abel did things the way God said they ought to be done. Cain did not. The Bible makes it really clear, without shedding of blood is no remission of sin, and so that had to be the prescribed offering that God expected people to bring. So God tells him, you do well, you'll be accepted. And that word accepted literally means the lifting up of the face. You know, your kids get mad and pouty, and maybe you know, chin up, come on, cheer up. But if you do not well, sin lies at the door, and it's just like it's ready to pounce. And I think all of us can identify with that. You know, sometimes it's the most unexpected times. All of a sudden, bang, the temptation's there. And so, but then God goes on to say, thou shalt rule over him. Unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. So we have a responsibility. That doesn't mean we can be sin-free until we get to glory. But it certainly does mean that we have a responsibility to fight temptation, the Lord taught us to pray that temptation would not come our way. And when it does, that God would give us the strength to do that, and he promised that he would. No temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. God is faithful, who will with temptation also make a way to escape. You may be able to bear it. And so we have those wonderful promises from God. And then there's speculation exactly about what God was talking about. Unto thee shall be his desire, thou shalt rule over him. But I think we explained that fairly well enough last week. And so we'll just go on from there. That's where we left off last week. So we begin at verse 8 tonight with the murder of Abel. And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. And the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? We'll stop there for now. And so the crime itself, now, if you have a reference Bible, you may have in the margin the reference of 1 John chapter 3 and verse 12. I'll read verse 11 just to get the context. For this is the message that you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another, not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore slew he him? Because his own works were evil and his brother's righteous. Why did the Pharisees hate Jesus? Russ?
He was jealous, and he thought that he was going to take the power away from them, and the Romans will put them out of their system.
Okay, there can be no question that that's true. Even before then, before they saw Jesus start to get this following, why did they hate him? Okay, that's a good answer, and it's absolutely accurate. What I'm looking for is the same thing that I just read. Let me find the verse and read it again. 1 John chapter 3, verse 12. Not as Cain, who was of that wicked one and slew his brother, and wherefore slew he him? Because his own works were evil and his brother's righteous. Now do you see what I'm looking for? Why did they hate Jesus?
Were evil, and Jesus was righteous, and they couldn't abide that.
Yeah, exactly. Same reason. Jesus' lifestyle was righteous. He preached righteousness. He exposed their hypocrisy. Their deeds were evil. His were always righteous. Same reason Cain slew Abel, according to 1 John chapter 3, verse 12. Now let's take that a step further. Why do unsaved people not like Christians?
They don't like giving up their sin.
See where we're headed with this?
Light, it's the light that they don't like.
Okay.
They don't like the light of the Lord.
Okay, and so you're saying the same thing, just in different words, because they do not like the fact that we believe that their lifestyle is wicked. And because they see in us, hopefully, a lifestyle that isn't doing those things. Same reason. Okay, so that's such a universal thing. And it's getting to the point now, especially in our country, but even worldwide, where Christians are the bad guys. Why? Why? Is it because we're doing crimes? Is it because we're just such terrible people? Why? Because the light exposes the darkness. And people that are happy in their, well, is happy the right word? People that want to continue in their sin don't want to be interrupted. They want to keep on living that way. If you were saved as an adult, you know what that's like. I know what that's like. I didn't want to start living the way I knew I should live until the light came in, and then all of a sudden, wow, I don't live that way anymore, right? So I think that's really significant in Abel's case here, in Cain's case. So God's interrogation in verse 9, the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And here's his answer. The answer is basically two ways. First of all, I don't know. Secondly, am I my brother's keeper? Now, the first one is an outright lie, isn't it? He knew good and well where Abel was because he'd buried him. But what do you read into his second comment? Am I my brother's keeper? What kind of emotion do you detect in that kind of a response?
Don't ask me. Don't ask me where he is.
Selfishness.
Okay.
Anger and sarcasm.
Sorry, I couldn't.
Anger and sarcasm.
Anger and sarcasm directed toward. Yeah. It's like God was the bad guy. And he's, at the same time, he's excusing himself, you know, in a sense. He's disclaiming responsibility. John?
I'd say it's like shifting the blame. You know, he's got to take care of himself. That's not my responsibility.
Okay, good, good. Are we our brother's keeper? Absolutely. And in what sense are we our brother's keeper? Not in the sense that Cain was necessarily talking about. He was saying, am I Abel's nursemaid? You know, am I the guy that has to make sure somebody knows where he is and that type of thing? But we use that phrase, don't we, today? We're our brother's keeper. And what do we mean when we say that? Doesn't mean we have to be checking up on each other all the time.
I believe that we have an accountability from each other.
Okay, let's take that a step further, an accountability for each other.
Encouraging and also confronting when we see something that is going against the Word of God.
Okay, good. It's a good answer. We do have a responsibility toward each other. We don't just, you know, if we see somebody struggling or we see somebody straying, it's not like our attitude is, well, I'm not my brother's keeper. He can take care of himself. She can take care of herself. We do have a responsibility toward one another. Okay, that I understand that's kind of a rabbit trail and it strays a little bit from what we're talking about here, but I think it's a good thing for us to think about, that we do have a responsibility toward each other. Some of us who've been around a little bit longer than others have formed kind of a textual group where we text each other things from our devotions and try to encourage each other and that type of thing, you know, and there's ways that we can do that just to reach out to one another, to encourage one another, to, you know, just once in a while say to somebody, hey, you know what, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your faithfulness or whatever.
I'll give a testimony on that one. It's a blessing when you get a text out of the blue and you know someone's directing toward you.
Yeah.
And you know that they love you
I'm sure you ladies do that in your ladies' Bible studies and different things like that. So it is so important to have that interaction. That's one of the reasons why God established a local church, because we need each other. We are our brother's keeper, and we do have a responsibility toward one another. And we shouldn't look at it as a burden. John? He was waving at little Jeremy. I thought he was.
It's a good thing it's not an auction.
Sold to the man in the back. Okay, so anyway, let's go on to verse 10. And he said, "Why, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth." And so this is to be Cain's punishment. The word vagabond basically means a wanderer. And the word earth in verse 11 and the word ground in earth, in verse 14, ground and earth are both the same Hebrew word. And so when God says in verse 11, you're cursed from the earth, obviously it doesn't mean you leave the planet, but you leave the ground that once was yours. Remember, he was a farmer. He was a tiller of the ground. And now that's to be taken away from him, and he is to be a vagabond. He's to be a wanderer. And so it's the same word there in verse 14 as well. "Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face I shall be hid. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. And it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me." Now, how in the world could that happen? Everyone that finds, how many times could you get killed? Does somebody have a different translation that words that differently? The last part of verse 14 there. Same basic thought there. And that's couched in a Hebrew understanding, kind of an idiom that they would understand, we don't necessarily. But what it basically means is everybody is going to be against him. Everybody who comes in contact with him, that's the way they feel about him. They want to slay him. They want to, so that's basically what Cain is saying. He said, my punishment is greater than I can bear. The whole populated earth is going to be against me, and everybody's going to want to kill me. And so we know, of course, that the Lord, and my time is, let's see, I never can tell time on that clock very well. We still have more time, so that's a good thing. So verse 15, the Lord said unto him, "Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him." Have you ever pondered why the Lord did that? What did Cain deserve? Is there any indication at all that Cain repented? I don't see any here or anywhere else in the Bible that Cain repented. Why is God extending mercy toward Cain? Well, we may not have a clear answer to that, but it certainly does demonstrate the mercy of God. But if nothing else, Cain's vagabond life for the rest of his life preached a sermon to everybody else who knew about him or came into contact with him. John?
I wonder if it could be partly that there really isn't any judicial system set up yet. And somebody killing another person, it wouldn't be a court type killing. It would be just a revenge.
So So maybe this could be a temporary arrangement until there was a, Linda?
God hadn't established the rule yet, a life for a life, did he?
Say that again.
That God hadn't established yet a life for a life like he did for the Mosaic Law, or even, I don't know, I'm just wondering if that was established later so that it wasn't necessarily in.
Okay, I think you're basically saying the same thing John said there. That's possible. Again, we don't know for sure, but I think that the life sentence that Cain had to exist as a continual, constant reminder that the wages of sin are severe. And so this is something that Cain has to deal with for the rest of his life. And I think it's, on the one hand, merciful of God to spare Cain's life, but on the other hand, how would you like to live the rest of your life knowing that everybody that met you wanted to kill you? Is that even more punishment, maybe, than taking his life? So, I sure wouldn't want to have to live that way. How about you? Well, that's the last we hear about Cain. But we do read about Cain's descendants. Well, verse 16, Cain went out from the presence of the Lord. So we have these two verses. Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden, and Cain knew his wife, she conceived, and so on. So Cain went out from the presence of the Lord. Again, we've talked several times about the fact that in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve met with God on a regular basis, and they communicated. Then after the fall, the Lord put the cherubim there with the flaming sword, lest Adam and Eve would enter into the garden, eat of the tree of life, and live forever. But the suggestion, I believe, is there that this was a meeting place. How else is Adam going to be taught? I mean, he's got to learn a different relationship with God now. He's got to learn a different lifestyle. And God's not just going to send him out and say, okay, you're on your own now. And so I believe that there were regular meetings between between Adam and God, and probably the descendants as well. And we get into that maybe a little bit more later on, but he goes out from the Lord's presence, and that word presence means the place of God's special presence. So Cain no longer had this opportunity to meet with God. I believe that's what this is saying, because that's what the Hebrew word suggests. God's special presence. And he dwelt in the land of Nod, and it's interesting that the word Nod means wanderer or vagabond. And so it's probably named for Cain's presence there. Names were very prophetic, and we'll see that. We won't have time to get into that tonight, but Lord willing, next week, get into to a deeper degree how prophetic names were, especially back in the Old Testament and in the early days. So we'll see that. So Cain knew his wife. The age-old question. I remember years ago before I even became a pastor, I was youth director in Calvary Baptist in Watertown, and there was a young man that was visiting, and I went over to talk to him and share the gospel with him, and it looked like he was really understanding and paying attention, and he said, I have a question, and I think, oh, good, where did Cain get his wife? And, where did Cain get his wife? Well, I think all of us know the answer to that. I mean, where else is he going to get his wife? And I think that probably Cain was married before he slew Abel. Who would want to marry a vagabond that everybody hates? Now, that's just, I'm not going to say that that's 100% true, but it rings true to me. And back in those days, genetics, that God when God created Adam and Eve, he created them with all the genes of all the offspring of all the people we see today. I don't believe there's any such thing as race, except for the human race. And as people would pair off with somebody that had similar traits to them, you would see these darker skin, lighter skin, taller, shorter, those type of traits all, start to develop. And why in the world am I getting off on that? Somebody help me out here. Yeah. So initially, today, if a brother would marry a sister, that could create some real problems to the offspring. But back then, the gene pool was just so great that was not a problem for centuries even, to marry a close relative. And of course, to begin with, that's all there was there, brothers and sisters. And so that's really not a problem. And I know other people could explain that a whole lot better than I just did, but no problem at all that Cain got his wife, obviously, from his sister. And then she conceived and bare Enoch. He built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. So that's all we have time for, but any questions or comments? Got plenty of time for that. John?
Well, it seems logical that he may have been married or had his wife beforehand, because there's, I don't know, it doesn't seem like there'd be that many people around yet. And if he was sent away, he'd be sent into the wilderness, I would think, away from everybody, because people would think we'd all be in like one place. Because it seems like there would be that many.
And that is totally speculation on my part, but it seems logical that would have been the case. Yes, Aaron?
Was Abel married?
We are not told that he was, so as far as we know. There are times we just have to say, I don't know, because the Bible doesn't say. So that's a good question, though. Linda?
Well, we could know for sure that he didn't have children, because otherwise it would have been recorded. Because the history of the descendants from Adam was recorded.
Yeah, genealogies are recorded. So,
Right.
so evidently, no, it doesn't appear to. That's a good question, though. We do see later on some of the genealogies here about Cain's descendants. But you're right, Linda. I don't believe there's any record of descendants of Abel. I didn't think about it that way. Okay, any other comments, questions? All right. I have a letter from the Kims, serving the Lord in Myanmar, used to be called Burma. And that is the missionary that our Christmas gift is going to help them out. And I'm